Hi, I'm Carolyn Williams. I'm a registered dietitian and culinary nutrition expert in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I am also a cookbook author and contributing editor to Cooking Light and Eating Well and a host of other magazines out there. My most recent cookbook is Meals That Heal, so shameless plug for my newest baby, but this is quick and easy anti-inflammatory eating. And I'm going to share with you today in 15 minutes or less, which is going to be a challenge for me, but the superpower of intermittent fasting. And it was really in my initial research into intermittent fasting that actually kind of spurred my interest in inflammation. And inflammation is now kind of my main focus of my writing and of my work. So during the next 14 and a half minutes now, I'm going to share what it is, what intermittent fasting is, the different types, the impact on metabolism, how it's different from your traditional weight loss calorie or diets, and suggested health benefits. And then if we have a second, I'd love to share my personal experience with it. So first off, let's talk about what it is and the three different types or approaches to it. So intermittent fasting is not about necessarily going without. And I know that sounds bizarre if you're not familiar with it or haven't tried it. But intermittent fasting, it is based on controlling the time window in which you eat. So it's not necessarily about cutting your calories. It's definitely not about drastically cutting your calories. It's not about what foods you can't have. It's about controlling that window in which you have them. Now, yes, usually calories, it's harder to get all the calories that you need within a smaller time frame. So usually calories go down slightly, but a lot of people think the weight loss from intermittent fasting is due to significantly less calories, and that's usually not it. My calorie level is not that much lower overall. Where the impact has come from, and where the impact usually comes from for most people when they're trying to lose weight with intermittent fasting, is with that controlled window of time. And you'll understand why in just a second. So there are three main approaches. 16-8 is the one that I try to follow or use on a regular basis. I found it's most doable for people. It works. It's very flexible. It works with whatever I've got going on during the day or week. And it's pretty adaptable. 24 or 16-hour fast are essentially the same thing, but you're just extending that window a little longer. And let me back up because I didn't then tell you what 16-8 was. But 16-8 is essentially referring to a 16-hour fasting window followed by an 8-hour feeding window or eating window. So you can eat, but it's only going to be within an 8-hour window. You're going to fast for 16 hours. So for example, let me explain how this might work, because 16 hours sounds like a long time, but in reality, I end my dinner at 7 o'clock at night. Fast forward 16 hours, and technically my fasting window can end at 11 a.m. That's not too bad. I'm asleep for at least half of that, and then I tend to be a morning person, so I'm busy, and so usually before I know it, and because hunger tends to not be a factor with intermittent fasting, I know that sounds bizarre, but appetite actually decreases somewhat the longer you go in a fast. I often go past 11 o'clock on the days that I'm fasting and not even realize it, go a little beyond that. So there's 16-8, there's 24-36 that go a little bit longer. 24 and 36 hours, research has suggested that you may get additional health benefits. But that is not required. So don't let that overwhelm you if you've never tried this before. That's if you like basic fasting and want to go further. You are still getting health benefits as well as weight loss benefits if you go 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours. The last approach is the 5-2 approach. So this is a little bit different in that 5 days out of the week, you're going to eat a regular calorie level. 2 days out of the week, you're going to eat a significantly lower calorie level. And by lower, I mean about 400 to 500 for a female, 500 to 600 for a male. So a quarter or less of what your calorie needs would be on a daily basis. All of these methods work. All of them give you some of the same health benefits and weight loss. It really is figuring out what works for you. And again, 16-8 is what I've found is most doable for a lot of people, but all of them are good methods to follow. So it was really changing research that was coming out 4 or 5 years ago on metabolism that first got me intrigued with intermittent fasting. I was asked to write an article on, how do you really need 6 small meals a day? How many times should you eat for metabolism? And honestly, I thought, this article will be a breeze. But I did my due diligence and started digging up the research just to double check myself. And what I found is, no, this article is not going to be a breeze because research had shifted a lot since I had last looked at metabolism research. And since I had been an undergrad getting my nutrition degree. And it really kind of shook my knowledge base for a while because it was so different from what I learned. But I had to go with what the research is suggesting, and today we even have a lot more to back that up. But basically, what I had been telling people, what I had been thinking, my own approach to eating, and that going too long without eating would slow our metabolism was false. What research suggests now is that going periods of time, 4, 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, even 36 hours, without eating, that does not slow our metabolism. So it was really contradictory to what I'd learned. But again, you have to look at the research. And we had new research that was coming out. And this isn't just one study. This is multiple. And today we have even more. But this also contradicted what I'd been trained. And again, my undergrad with counseling and what I've been telling people for years, and that we need 6 small meals a day, or we just need regular meals and snacks to keep our metabolism going, to fuel our body. And once I kind of got in the metabolism research and started looking at the fasting research, that really wasn't true either. So again, another major shift in my professional mindset that I had to really come to terms with. And while it is the metabolism effects that may first interest people or get them intrigued with how fasting works, the benefits from fasting largely come because of the effects or the changes to hormones. And this is because there are 2 modes of operation in our body. There's a feeding mode and there's a fasting mode, okay? And you need both. And essentially they should be about equal in duration. So 12 hours and 12 hours, if you will. Now, let me explain what happens in each of these modes. And I'm not going to get too heavy in the science, but I do think it helps a lot if you understand why you're doing what you're doing if you do try fasting. So in the feeding mode, that's that window of time. Let's just say for me, it's 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Or maybe for someone else, it might be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's just that window of time. So you eat your first or consume or drink your first thing at 7 a.m. and then the last thing you eat or drink is at 7 p.m. That would be considered your feeding window. And during that time, at various times, you may be taking in breakfast, meals, snacks, whatever, during the day, periodically. What's happening is you digest that food and the carbohydrate in it will eventually get broken down into glucose. The glucose is absorbed into your bloodstream. So your blood glucose rises. That is completely normal. That's what's supposed to happen. What's also normal is your pancreas then secretes insulin to help your body or to help lower your blood glucose level. Your pancreas secretes the insulin, and that is normal. That's what's supposed to happen. And the insulin helps that glucose in the bloodstream, helps the body cells use it. And if the body cells don't need it, it stores that glucose. So the insulin will its first kind of mode of operation is to, if any cells need energy right then, it will help those cells immediately use that glucose and break it down for energy. But your needs at that time may or may not be that high. So if you don't need a lot of that glucose that's floating around your bloodstream, then the insulin can direct some of that excess glucose to be stored as glycogen. And this is like a short-term storage form of glucose, and it's stored in your muscles and your liver. And it's nice, it's limited, but it's nice in that 3, 4, 5 hours down the road, 6 hours down the road, if I go to the gym or I go walk the dog or go to the grocery store and I need some energy, my cells need energy, my body can quickly break that glycogen down into glucose, and it can go in my bloodstream and my cells can break it down for energy. So, but if you still have an excess amount of glucose in your bloodstream, then your body's got to do something with it to help pull it out of the bloodstream to lower your blood sugar level. So it will store that excess energy, that excess glucose, as fat in your adipose tissue. Okay, your fat tissue is unlimited in its storage, and it's essentially your backup energy reserve, or that's kind of how it was designed. So that's feeding. Fasting mode is, let's say I ended my dinner, or anybody can end their meal or they're eating for the day at 7 p.m. Okay, fast forward 3, 4, 5 hours later, and as my cells gradually may need energy during the night, my body can break any glycogen down that I've stored and release that glucose, and I've got an immediate supply of glucose for my cells to use for energy, which is why we don't just pass out or black out. But let's fast forward 8, 10, 12 hours. Well, that backup supply of glycogen is, we don't have as much anymore. It's almost gone. So at that point, the body is forced to find another fuel. And at that point, it starts tapping into your fat stores. Your glucose level is essentially the same, but your insulin level is low because your insulin level is low because your glucose isn't going up and down because you're not eating and you haven't been for a while. Your glucose remains stable though. That's the interesting thing. But insulin is low, and when insulin's low, that allows the body to tap into your fat stores and break them down and trigger that fat burning. So again, you're supposed to have an equal amount, or these are supposed to go hand in hand. Both are normal physiological processes that are supposed to happen. And what Dr. Jason Fung suggests, who is what I consider one of the thought leaders in intermittent fasting. He wrote the obesity code, and if you're interested in the science, I highly recommend you check it out. It is pretty science heavy though. But what he suggests is that our feeding window has gotten larger. It's gotten bigger over the course of time, particularly after the 1970s and forward. And if you think about it, starting in the 1980s and going forward, that's really when we started to see all these new convenience products and things were quick and easy and we could stick in the microwave. It's also when we started to see all these fast food places popping up on every corner, quick service restaurants. I mean, think about our food environment now compared to in the 1950s or 60s. We are surrounded by food wherever we go. We have availability to it. So what's happened is, rather than like in the 1950s and 60s when we might have a breakfast and then have dinner or have lunch, have dinner, whatever, our eating day was done and our feeding window is about truly 12 hours. And we didn't eat again until breakfast the next day, usually 12 hours or so from then. What's happened is our feeding window has gotten bigger and bigger. So we may start having a coffee drink at 6, and then we are having a bowl of ice cream at 10 o'clock that night. So our feeding window is 14, 15, 16 hours, which means our fasting window is going down. And so when you look at that, when you think about the effects on fat storage and fat burning, that means we're spending a larger proportion of our time in fat storage and a much lower amount in fat burning. In fact, we may not even get to that need to ever break down fat and burn fat for energy. So this really explains why calories in, calories out. I know that math never worked in my own body, and we've known there's more to it than calories, and this helps explain some of that, what else there is to it. This also helps explain the obesity epidemic a little bit more. So how is IF or intermittent fasting different from traditional weight loss? Well, it mainly has to do with the actual weight loss. Now, if you look pound for pound, it's not too different from your traditional diets that cut calories. It's about the same. IF weight loss may be a little bit higher, but where it differs in is you lose in that, let's say you step on the scale and you've lost a pound, or that's what it says. Well, with traditional diet methods, probably only about a quarter of that pound, a quarter to a half, is true fat that you've lost. A quarter of that or more is lean body mass that you've lost, and then there's some water in there that you've lost as well. We'd like to think that the whole pound is a loss of fat, but it's not. What we see with intermittent fasting, in that pound that you might lose, a higher proportion of that is from fat loss. A much lower proportion of that is from lean body mass, which helps preserve that metabolism. And that's because fasting triggers an increase in human growth hormone, which helps us hang on to that lean body mass, which is what we want, and that helps preserve our metabolism. Other difference is fasting is not about deprivation or starvation. It's not about drastic calorie reduction. It's just more about controlling the period of time in which we eat. So I can still have pretty much anything I want. Now, granted, I should make healthy choices because I'm trying to squeeze all the nutrients I need into an 8-hour window. But it's not about what I can't have or what I can't go over. It's just eating within that window. So health benefits, obviously weight loss is one, and it preserves that lean body mass as well as metabolism, may even increase metabolism slightly. There are some studies that suggest metabolism may even increase by 3 to 14% during fast. But also it has other major health effects, and one of the big ones is it improves your glucose management. It can improve or decrease your insulin resistance. It lowers hemoglobin A1C. It reduces inflammation, which is I've mentioned is a big interest for me. Inflammation is at the root of every health condition affecting Americans today, whether it is weight loss, whether it's heart disease, cancer, autoimmune diseases. Inflammation is that underlying driver in your body that can be pushing all those conditions forward. So anything you can do to reduce that inflammation is good. It also improves brain health. A lot of people say when they're fasting they have a heightened sense of focus or concentration. That's somewhat subjective just because that's more qualitative in nature. But what I do want to point out about brain health is a lot of people don't realize Alzheimer's is nicknamed type 3 diabetes because of the higher glucose levels in the brain that have been correlated with an increased Alzheimer's risk. And so intermittent fasting helps regulate that glucose level and has been suggested to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, possibly even slow its development. And then it has been shown to slow the aging process. So really quick, what's allowed during fasting? So there is no medically defined protocol for intermittent fasting right now. So any plan you see out there, any expert, any book you see on fasting is essentially that person's opinion, or hopefully they have a scientific background in nutrition or medicine. And that's their opinion. That's what's worked for them. That's what they're recommending for people. So there is no exact right or wrong way right now. I say all that because you will find plans vary greatly about what you can consume during your fasting window. Some will say you can only have water. Some will say you can only have water and black coffee. Others are a little bit more lenient. Some will say you can have water, black coffee. You can have bulletproof coffee, which is that coffee with a little bit of fat in it. If you want to. Some will even say you can have up to 40 calories of something that will not break your fast. The reason you can add fat to your coffee, it technically doesn't break your fast. Yes, you're getting calories, so it breaks your fast, but it doesn't break it in the sense of it increases insulin any, and you're still in the fat burning zone, and that's because fat doesn't trigger an insulin response. So you still stay in that fat burning zone. So you will see it's all across the board. There's no right or wrong way. Find what works for you. I tend to be on the more lenient side. I'm going to have water. I'm going to have coffee. I may even put a splash of 10 calories of unsweetened almond milk in my coffee. I may even have the bulletproof coffee if I'm really hungry one morning because that fat in the coffee can really help with satiety. So who might consider it? if you're trying to lose weight, it is something that you definitely may want to consider. It's not for everybody, but where I've seen it particularly helpful is people who really struggle with carb intake or insulin resistance. I've also really seen it helpful for older females, older to middle-aged females who are really struggling to lose weight. And we know that hormones are at play, and this is one approach that I've really seen actually be successful in those individuals. So who might want to avoid it? If you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, if you definitely want to avoid it. Children, we just don't know enough about the potential effects. You don't want to risk them not getting enough nutrients. And then if you have a major health condition, typically with diabetes, it can have some positive results, same with heart disease and other conditions, but you always want to check with your doctor before you try any of those, particularly if you're on diabetes medications or anything. You will likely have to change those up some when you are fasting. So let me know what I didn't cover, because that was super quick and I know I went over my 15 minutes, but I'll be answering questions, so let me know what else you'd like to know or what I didn't cover. And again, I'm Carolyn Williams. My cookbook is Meals That Heal, Anti-Inflammatory Eating, and you can find this on my website along with my social media. So thanks for having me today.